So what image uploading is that if you need to have a user upload an image or file from their computer, then you need to have some sort of uploading solution. One of the solutions that we'll be using is called Cloudinary. And Cloudinary is a base website where it allows you to host images and videos and other assets on their website for free. And if you want to expand the limits of it, then there's other paid alternatives and other pricings for them. So that is what image uploading is. The best use case of it is if you are having some sort of a profile on your web page, like this image right here. Instead of having a static image or having to put a bunch of users inside of your images and your image folders, that could take up a lot of space and it doesn't go well with your database. And you shouldn't really store all of the sensitive information as well as images in your database because it does take up a lot of space. So a better solution is to have something else that takes care and holds that for you, which is Cloudinary. The other solution is called AWS, and AWS is also what we talked about yesterday to host all of our websites, and it also hosts our images as well. And technically, if you boil down and dig into Cloudinary, it actually uses AWS when you strip all those layers down. So the goal for today is that I already created a starter file. So go ahead and go into this GitHub and clone it down into your project directory. And then we'll go over what you would need to do to get started on a React on Rails project. For this first part of the lecture, instead of having us do it together, I actually did it for you. And all it is just having all of the authentication done. So we can just focus on mostly the image upload. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on the authentication and getting started and all of that. So go ahead and do a get clone. So what you would do is you would copy this SSH key, go into your project directory and do get clone and then paste. And that should take some time. And then once you're done, be sure to CD into that project because we will be working in that project. And you should also have sign in or sign up for an account if you haven't already, because we will be using Cloudinary to store all of our images. And we need certain keys from Cloudinary for it to work. What keys are is that they are essentially the link to your own application to their service. So if you have access to their keys, then you are available to use their service through an API call. And that's what we'll be doing. And we'll deep more into APIs with third-party APIs, but today is just a brief intro of that.
Hey, Henry, what kind of things would you actually put up here? I mean, if I'm going to have like 2 pictures on my site, is that worth creating or I guess hosting them on Cloudinary? Or I mean, what's kind of the size of application that you would really want to throw stuff up there?
So any user's profile, I would recommend doing it this way instead of storing them in your database or linking them. But if you have like a little logo or anything like that, that could be inside of your image folder. That shouldn't take up too much space. But anything that is multiple of something like user profiles, they can be a number of profile images, then you would use those. And also, if you have any huge images, like if your header image for some reason is a big image, then I would use this as well. But for this application, we're just doing the user's profile because that's where you would be using it as well. That's a good question. So once you have it cloned, go ahead and CD into your project, and you would run two things. You would first run a bundle. I already removed the Ruby version, so you can skip that step. So go ahead and run a bundle, and then once you're done running the bundle, do a bundle create and migrate. So after a bundle, you should also do a create and migrate. And we are just configuring the back end, so everything will be working. And then in here, go ahead and CD into the client folder into another tab or a panel. And once you have that, go ahead and run a yarn. And this will take a while. So run a yarn in your client folder. And if you do want to push this up to your own GitHub, it is linked to my remote. So if you do get remote-v, it would be my GitHub and with my remote. So you would just need to remove it and then add your own. And you can just follow those get DPL, get flow to do that. So as that is going on, I'll show you a little bit more of what I have created. So I'm going to start my server on the Rails side, as well as the client side. And it looks like for me, I do need to pin my Ruby version, which is fine for it to work. But for yours, you might not need to. So all of the auth is working. And go ahead and register a new user.
If we do test at test.com, is that going to throw it off? Is there a database on this?
You would need to create your own database, which would be the DB create and migrate, which you would have ran earlier, but it will be a
Correct.
different.
So the database is local, then it's not being hosted somewhere.
Nope.
Okay.
So then go ahead and create a user and then log in. And then you can test everything out. Everything works with the authentication bit. But the page that is new is this profile page here. And this is where we'll be doing the bulk of the work. Essentially, this is the profile show as well as the edit. So if you edit, you have the ability to edit the user's information as well as their photo. But for now, we need to implement that. But this is where we will be working in for today. And then how that looks like here is that inside of the profile, I have a default image here. That's just this black image here. And essentially it is a form as well as a show page all in one component. So inside of the state, I have a object of key value pairs, and that would be for the form. That would be for the edit form. And since it's a form, we need to grab all the values from the consumer because we are using the auth consumer to grab the user's information. And this toggling edit here just toggles this form on and off. And then the handle change works the same way as the other handle change does. The only difference is that I have my items in an array of objects. So that is why it will be written like this instead of the normal way we would do it. But that's the only difference there. But it works the exact same way. And then with the profile, it's just a grid with the image as well as the name and the email. And then here with the form, inside of this form here, this is where we will add the stuff for us to upload an image. So this column here with the width 4, around line 50 to 49, that is where we'll be adding, in addition to our form, the drop zone items. And then everything else is just a regular form. So it is doing a conditional render. So if we're not editing, then it will just be the show of the items, the show of the profile. But if we are editing, it will show the form. And that's all that has been done so far. So there is something that we need to review, and it's is the name here. Because right now, name is actually empty. And because the main reason is that if you do the authentication straight out of the box, the main attributes that the user will have is the email and password. Everything else hasn't been added yet. So we need to add that. And this is just a quick review of how to do that. So the first step into adding a attribute is that you need to attach it to the user somehow. So you may need to run a migration file or use something that's already there. So luckily for us, for our way of handling the backend, we do have other attributes of name, nickname, image, and email. We also need image too. So if your project needs name and any other attributes that you need, you need to run a migration to add it to the user. Same with image as well, because we need to store the image in our database, and it will be a string, so it will be a URL. So the URL comes from cloudinary. Once you host it onto cloudinary, it'll give you a URL, and you can just use that URL like how you would with the other images. So that's the first step, is to make sure that your user and your table should have the fields of the attributes that you want. In our case, we want name and image. And then make sure you run that migration file and do a db migrate after. The next item of business is that we need to have this be permitted in the parameters. So if we go inside of the controllers here, in the application controller, we would have to create a method to allow the attribute that we have to be inside of the private parameters. I don't know why my spacing is off. It's 4 instead of 2. So you this should be familiar. So we'll do a before action. And with the before action, we will call it configure permitted parameters. If we are dealing with the device controller. So let's go ahead and create that method of configure permitted parameters. So that would be under protected. And then we will do a new method with the exact same name. I am going to switch the settings real quick because this will bother me.
It feels like it came with the package because mine's doing the same thing.
I created it on my own, so it shouldn't do that.
Yeah, mine's doing it too, even though I've checked my spacing.
Yeah, mine is configured to 8 for some reason.
Where was tab settings?
So if you go down here to select indentation, is right by the UTF. And then you would use tabs instead of spaces, and then the usual would be 2. But I've seen some people do 4 or 1, but the usual is 2.
Gosh, that's annoying.
So then here inside of the method, and this comes from the device documentation, we need to permit the parameter of what we want into the private params in device. So it will look like this. And then we want to do this when we sign up. You may want to do it when you update, and that will be called something else. So you may have to look that up for update or for any other device action, because sign up is only for registration. And then the key that we want to add is name. And that is in the application controller.
Henry, can you remind me what sanitizer means?
Yes, because when we have the private params, it has the user with the key value pair. And by default, it only comes with email and password. Just straight out of the box with device. What we're saying here is that we are adding, in addition to these parameters, also name. That way it will be permitted when we pass this down to device. So that is what these lines of codes are doing.
So when it says sign up right there, what is that referencing?
That is referencing to something in the device end, and that is where you would register.
Is that like the method though, or like what, a class or something?
Yeah, that's the method in device of sign up.
Okay.
And then there's other methods for other actions, such as updating the account. But I don't have that on top of my head, so you may have to look that up. So be sure you have this in your application controller right after you add it into your migration, because we do need the name. So with this being created, let's go ahead and restart our server so our changes will be applied. So I'm going to restart both of my servers, and then we'll create a whole new user, because right now the current test user doesn't have a first name. So we'll change that. And we can either change that with the edit, or we can do that with the new user. But let's see if we can do it with the edit, actually. So name is Bob. Looks like I need to log in. Yeah, it looks like it doesn't take an effect yet. So you may have to create a new user, as well as add it into the register. So let's go ahead and do that for the register. So we'll go into auth. So it'll be in your client folder, source, components, auth, register. And we need another column for name. Whoops. So inside of the state, we will also store name. By default would be a string. And then inside of the handle submit, we also need to bring down name. And if we are registering, we will also bring down name. And then the handle change would be the same. But our render would also have name. And we need to add in a whole nother input for name. So I'm actually going to duplicate this one, but change it for name. So this will be name, 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 name. So we're just adding name and any other attributes that we need for the signup. So I added in the state, the handle submit, 2 places here. So when we are pulling it down, as well as when we are registering, and then inside of the render, we pull it down one more time and then create a new input for that. So now let's go ahead and create a new user. And I'm going to create a different email. And we'll go into profile, and then you can see that Bob is here. And that's how you would add additional attributes to your items. Edit doesn't fully work yet because we haven't fully implemented the edit feature. So that wouldn't work just quite yet. So now let's go ahead and focus on uploading the image. So to do that, we actually need a tool, and the tool is called React Drop Zone. So we need to add that into our front end. So inside of the client folder, we are adding another package, and it will be called React Drop Zone. And before you do this, you need to check that if you have a React version of 16.8 or higher. Because if you have anything lower, it won't be, it wouldn't work for your application. So to check it, check in your package.json and see if your React and React DOM version is above 16.8 or higher, which it is. And
Sorry,
then go ahead and press enter.
I'm a little behind. I can't make a new user.
I'm actually having that same issue too. Like I did one earlier, but then it just kicked me off my Ruby server and said that I needed to run a bundle install, and I have done a couple. It's still like giving me a weird warning.
I would double check if you have the application controller correct,
Yeah.
as well as the register correct, because that's the only thing we would change.
Okay. I think I might have got the gems finally working.
So then after you add React Drop Zone, go ahead and run your Yarn server again. Oops, I just installed it one more time, which is fine. That would just update the package. So we need to edit the form. So the form here to have React Drop Zone. So to do that, will be in the profile JS, and this will be inside of your edit user or whatever form you're doing for the image upload. But for our case, it's in the profile component. So we need import drop zone from React Drop Zone. And this is the package we just installed. And then inside of our state for the form values, we would add one more attribute, a file, and by default, it should be an empty string.
Hey, Henry, can you just, I'm a little confused. So when people upload it, how does that actually look when you upload a file?
Yeah.
Does that go straight to
React
cloudinary
Drop
if that's
Zone,
where we're hosting it?
if we take a look at React Drop Zone, what it gives us is that it gives us the ability to drag and drop images into their zone. So it'll look like, this is not their GitHub. It'll look like this. So you're able to drag and drop some files, or you're able to click and select the files. And then once you're done and once you submit it, our front end and back end will communicate to Cloudinary, and that will host it, and it will give us a URL back for us to use. So that is what's going on. So we need to implement the drop zone box first, and that's what we're doing inside of the profile here. So we need to import it first, add the file into state, and then let's go ahead and create another method. I am going to do it right under component did mount, and I'm going to say on drop. So the dropped items will be coming from files, and this is what we'll be doing. So we will just be setting the state, and we are keeping all the form values the same. But for the files that we are dropping in, so this is just keeping everything that's already there the same. But for the file, it would be the files that we are bringing in, and it will be the first file. Because it is a profile image, you can only do one of those. If you do more, you have to play around and change some things here and there. But for now, let's just focus on one file. So you need this method here. So this updates the state for the file to be the first file in the files array.
Is it form values or form value? Because you have both.
Values.
Values, okay.
Yes, good catch. And then we need to go to the edit view. Here, if you scroll down, there's on around line 49 to 50, there's the edit view function. We need to also add it here as well. So inside of the form value that we are bringing in, we also need to bring in the file. And then here, when I mentioned how we'll be adding the drop zone here, that is where we will put it inside of this column here. So syntactically, this will look really bad. So you can wait until I slack it out. But everything is coming from the documentation. So we are bringing in the drop zone tool, and it will have an opening and closing tag. But inside of the opening tag, we need to pass down two attributes. The first attribute, the first prop, would be the function we just created of this.onDrop. The second one is that if we should allow multiple or not. In our case, since it's a profile image, we would do false. For your other, it might be true. So then inside of the drop zone tags, this is where it will be weird. So go ahead and do one set of curly brace, and then a set of parentheses, and another set of curly brace. So it will look like this. So inside of the set of curly brace, the inner curly brace, we will do a get root prop, and then get input prop. Again, this is from the documentation. So this is what you would need to do to get this up and running. And then we will do is drag active. And then go ahead and do that arrow here and do another set of curly brace like this. And then press enter between those set of curly braces. So you should now see at least 4 sets of curly brace. If you see more, then there might be one too many. So then we are doing a return, and there's a parentheses there, a div. And this div will also have an ending div. So let me create that real quick. is that we need to get all of the root props inside of this div, because this is where we'll be grabbing the image. And that's a function, again, from React drop zone. The second thing we need is that we'll just style it a bit so it doesn't look empty. So you need to style it just a bit. And we're using what we learned yesterday of having it be a module for the styles. So I actually created it down here. And this is what it will look like. So it will have a width, a border, display, and it will align all those items. So it'll be styles like this dot drop zone.
Sorry, Henry, can you explain what get root props does?
Don't really get caught up to in these three functions because that's what the documentation says. So
Okay.
it actually handles things for you.
Okay.
But essentially, you're just grabbing all the props that were already there and passing it into the div.
Okay.
So that's something from React drop zone.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. And then in here, inside of this div, we will do an input. And this is where we would get the input props. Again, this is something from React drop zone, and this is handled through React drop zone. So that's all it's all doing stuff in the back that we don't see. So then right after this input, we are going to run some logic. So is drag active? So we are able to have a item be able to drop, then we would put a message saying drop files here. File here. Actually, let's just say image, just to be more descriptive. Else, it would say, it will say try dropping. So we'll do another p tag. So we'll say try dropping it here or click to select. So that is what the box will look like. And we need to do one more thing for this to work. Well, a few more things. But let's see what this looks like inside of our app. So it looks like this. So you can choose an image or you can drop the image in there. So we know that that part is working so far. So to get this up and running, we actually need to change the handle submit. I think it's below. Oh. The handle submit is not here. So let's go ahead and create it then. I thought I added a handle submit. Okay. So since there isn't a handle submit, we'll just create one. So we'll do a handle submit here. And first thing we do is that we need to prevent the page from reloading and also saving our information inside of a URL. And then we need to grab some items. So the items we need to grab from state is from the form values. And we need to grab the name, email, and file. And this is all from this .state. The other thing we need to grab is from our provider of the auth, and we need to have the auth user as well as the auth function of update user. and that is inside of our provider. But we are passing it in through our consumer, and thus we have it inside of our props because of this line here. So we're passing all of the stuff from the consumer into props, calling it auth.
Henry, can you go back to your handle submit?
And then afterwards, we will call update user from auth. Wait a minute. Don't do it this way. This actually is a lot more syntax. Do this.props.auth here. So you can just say user and update user. Do it this way instead. I was just following the lecture, and the lecture does it a little bit long. So then we'll call the update user. And we need to pass in a few parameters. The first parameter would be the ID, so we know which user to update. And then the next thing is the object of what we are going to submit. And this is usually your state, but our state also has other logic like updating the form and toggling the form. So we actually just want to bring in those specific values of form values. So what you could do is you could just you can do it two ways. You can just create a new object and bring in name, email, and file. Or what else you can do is you can just bring in this .state.form values. So that's really up to how you do it. But I'm just gonna do it like this, just so it makes more sense visually of what I am passing in. So I'm making an object and passing in the name, email, and file from the state. And then afterwards, after we're done updating the user, we need to reset our form. So we'll do this.setState. We'll toggle off the editing form. So editing will be false instead of true. And then the form values would be object of everything that was already there of form values, with the file being empty, an empty string. So that seems like we did a lot in that little amount of time. So I'll give you a couple seconds to write that down, and then we'll go over through it one more time, and then we'll update our auth provider. So this is all in the profile component. And this will usually happen in some sort of a form where you can either upload a profile image or edit a profile image. In our case, it will be the profile component. So the first thing you need to do is you need to import React Drop Zone. That's the tool we're using. That's the little drop zone feature here. The other thing we need to do is that we need to add file into our state so we're able to store the value of the file that we are passing in. And then we will create a onDrop function. And what this does is that when we are bringing in a file, it grabs everything that is there already, plus the new file you added. So this just means that you're adding the file into state for it to be stored. That's what the onDrop is. It's very similar to the handle change, but for files. The next thing you would need is inside of your form, you would need to bring in file, and you would bring in the drop zone tool. And this is how it will usually look like this. So all of this is coming from the documentation. So you need a minimum of a div as well as an input and then some message here. So with this, what we would do is that we are creating a div with the input in it. And we are going to grab both props for each of those items. So the root prop as well as the input prop. Those are just grabbing properties to get the information from the file and other information that React Dropzone needs for the image upload to work. And then we're seeing that if you're done uploading a file, we would just toggle the message. And that is what you need to do inside of your form. And then inside of your handle submit, you would handle your submit very similarly, but you would also need to add in the file as well with everything that you're passing in. And then when you're resetting the form, be sure to have the file be an empty string.
Why do you need file to be an empty string when you're setting all the other form values to be what they are in state?
So this is what is already, so this is after the update. And then we are just resetting this to be empty, because if it's already filled, you're not able to, you won't able to see the message. So the user might not know that you're able to create or to add an image here.
Oh, so the state would be full, like the name email file would all have things in them, and then you're setting the state to those form values, and then but you're clearing the file one.
Yes.
Okay.
Or else they'll think there's already a file in here, things like that. So that's just a user experience thing.
Okay, I see.
Okay. So we need to define the update user and from our provider, because we don't have that information yet. And then also pass it down into our component. So let's go ahead and add that logic. And this logic is coming from our auth provider. So go ahead and go into your providers. So it'll be client source providers, and then auth providers here. And this handles all your authentication stuff like register, log in, log out. And also, we will do update user here. So with the update user, what we would do is that we are passing in the ID, so we know which one to update, and then the user object, which is the name, email, and the file. So this is how we would pass in the data. This is a modified version of how we've been doing things, just because of how we are doing it in the controller side. So we need to create a new data object, and it will be a form data. We need to pass it at a certain syntax for this to work. And then we would append the file to be the user file. So the file that we would grab from user.file. We're able to use this later in our controller. And then what we would do is that we will do axios call.put, and we're actually going to create a custom route for this to work. And we're also going to pass in information through the URL. So what we would do is we need to do a backtick, and we will go to /API/users and slash and the interpolated value of ID. And then this is how queries work online, is that everything following a question mark, you're able to pass in that information through the URL. So the pattern is key value pairs, but it would be with the equal sign. So I'm passing in the name equal to the interpolated value of user.name. And so we need to do an and here. This is how you do an and in the URL. And the email equal to the interpolated value of user.email. Then finally, we need to pass in our file, and it has to be in this form data here. So we'll do a comma after our string interpolation and also pass in the data like that. And we will do our promise handling. So our then with the response, what we would do, I'm just going to do this in one line instead of multiple. We will do this dot set state of the user that is already in the state to be res.data, the new updated user. And then I'll do the same catch here. So this is a different way of doing things because of how we're handling our drop zone. And then before we forget, we need to add this to our value so our other components can use it. So I'm going to do this right at the bottom of set user. We'll do update user is equal to this dot update user.
Henry, could you explain the value of data again?
Yes. So we'll back up and explain what's going on here. So the file for drop zone and cloudinary, it takes in a specific format. So we have to format in a certain way. It doesn't allow it to be read if it's just a key value pair or object or JSON. So we need to have it be the way they want it, which is form data. So what we would do is that we would have data to be a new object of form data and then have the file be into that format. So now it's the right format for cloudinary to use to be able to store it on their application. And then what we're doing here is that we are still doing a API call, but after the question mark, we're passing in information. So you can pass in information through the URL. So the URL being this URL here, and anything after the question mark, you're able to pass in. So we're passing in the name with the user.name and the email to be the user.email, along with the data in the right format. So the file in the right format. And that's what's going on in this function here.
Okay, cool. And so form data, is that from drop zone or where is that coming from?
So this form data is coming from a JavaScript function, and that's what drop zone needs to the information to be.
Okay, I just didn't see that before.
Yep. But the thing is that with this route, this actually doesn't go anywhere. So we need to actually create the route as well as the controller for it to work. So I am going to go into my terminal and I'm going to stop my servers because right now, if you keep your servers running, it won't run the updates. So we would just stop both of them. So let's go ahead and create a controller. And this will be an API controller. So it needs the API. And we're creating a user's controller. And we're using the same idea of what we learned at the first or second week of Ruby of overriding a method in Ruby. So we'll be overriding and adding in addition to the device user controller. And we'll be doing an update like this. And we don't need the predefined routes. We'll be creating our own. So we are creating a controller of user, and this will override the update functionality for the device update. So we're running this instead of the device update. So then let's go ahead and go into our routes. So we are able to hit this API call. So this route is inside of config routes. And these are your API routes. And the one that we need will be inside of the namespace API. And it will be resources user. There's multiple ways you can write this, but we only want the update route. So you can just write it like this, or you can write it like a get or a put request with users, things like that. So we're just specifying an API route here. So this is your config routes. So let's see if it actually gets to this point. So we need to go into our application controllers, API user controller, and we need to have it. If before you run this, you need a user because we actually need the user data for this to work. So we need to do a before action authenticate user. Again, that's coming from device, making sure that if you reach this point, you need to be logged in, or else it won't allow you to do anything below this action. So before action, make sure they're logged in.
What's the bang do?
That's just what the method is called on device.
Oh, okay.
And then the update for now, I'm just going to do a binding.pry just to see if we reach this point. If we don't, that means that we need to change our items around maybe our routes to see if we are going to the right place. So I'm just going to put binding.pry here. And I'll slack out my controller of what I have. So I am going to find an image. And what kind of image should I use for my profile image?
An alien.
Alien. Nice, I'll use Yoda. So I'm going to download this image. Feel free to use whatever image you want. I'm going to have this be in my desktop for it to be easy access, and I'll just call this Yoda. So I just grab an image. You may have an image on your desktop already, but I do not. So let's go ahead and see if we get to this endpoint. So let's go ahead and start our servers again. I forgot to start my Rails server. And then log in into your one with the name. And then we'll do profile. And let's go ahead and select this item of Yoda. And that should be in there. And I don't know why the text didn't change. And then we'll do update. So it looks like it does take us into our pry. And that is awesome. So we actually do have our information. So we just do params. We can see that with the parameters, we have the file to be that specific format of what they want. See, because if we don't have these information, then it won't go through. So it needs like action dispatch, the type of file it is, the original file name, the headers, things like that. So that's what the data of the form data is. And the other information that we have is Bob, is the name, as well as the email, which is our email here. And then the ID of the user. So it looks like our data is going through and it does hit this endpoint. So I'm go ahead and press Q if you don't see the terminal, and then do exit. And let's go ahead and remove the pry. And then this is where we'll be handling the user update as well as the file upload. So before we get started, we actually need to add in the cloudinary configuration. And luckily for us, cloudinary does have a gem. So let's go ahead and add that gem. So inside of your gem file, right below the device token auth gem, go ahead and add in cloudinary. So the cloudinary gem here. and then run a bundle right after you add this gem. Something else that you would need to add is that we need to be able to store our API keys, because we don't want to post this into GitHub, because there are some bots out there that will grab your API keys and they're able to use your account and able to grab your information, like your credit card information and all that. So you don't want to do that. A better solution to that is to hide it in development, and then you're able to put it into production if you need to. So the gem to hide your information, especially your API keys, is called .env-rails. So you would need to add that, but be sure to add it in your development group. And then go ahead and run a bundle to bundle both the cloudinary and the .rails, the .env rails. And while that is going on, inside of our gitignore, we also need to have our .env to not be pushed up into GitHub because of the reasons I listed before. So we need to store the .env inside of our gitignore. And this is just to help us later on, but we'll create two files in the main directory. One called .env, this is where your API keys will be, and the other one will be a .env.example, like that. So this file here is not going to be pushed into GitHub, but this one will be. And this one will let whoever is working on the project with you, or whoever is looking at the project, this will signify that they need an API key for this to work, or else this wouldn't work for them. So inside of the .example, we will do a cloud name, and this has to be all caps, or just follow the documentation with your API. But for cloudinary, you would need to have it in all caps, equal to, we also need the API key and an API secret. And then copy these 3 lines inside of the .env. So this one will just let the users and other developers on your team know that you do need these credentials for this app to work. But this here is where we're actually going to be putting our own credentials for it to work. And your keys and cloud name would all be different, and I would recommend never to share this to anyone, or push it to GitHub or post it anywhere public. So to grab this information, what you would do is go ahead and sign in into your cloudinary, and then the information after you sign in would be inside of your profile page. So I'm actually going to stop the pause. Let's go ahead and get back into it. So during the break, you should be able to add your API keys of the cloud name and API secret and the API key itself. And be sure you did that in the .env. I'm not going to show it because I am recording this video. The second thing is that go ahead and go into your Slack, because this next part will be slacking it out. So we'll be creating a whole new file inside of the config folder. And as you remember, the config folder, not only does it hold our Rails, but it also holds everything that Rails needs to run initially to get it up and running. So we'll create a new file, and we'll call this cloudinary.yaml. And this just loads up our API keys into our application for this to work. Then go ahead and go into Slack and copy what is in Slack and paste it into this YAML file here. So that is in your config folder. And it is the cloudinary YAML file that you will create. So this will load it up into your account. So then inside of your user's controller, we'll start to fill out the method here. So first off, we need to grab the user. So it would be user dot find with params ID.
Sorry, where was the cloudinary.yaml
It will be in your config folder.
config? Okay, thank you.
So we need to find the user, and we also need to grab in the name as well as the email. And we need to do some logic on this, because if the name is the exact same name, then we shouldn't change it. Or if it doesn't have a name, then we'll just leave it as the username currently. So for the username, params name, if it does already exist, then it will just be whatever it is currently. Else it will be the user.name that we pass in. And we will do a similar thing with the email as well. So user.email equals params email with the params email here. It does exist, else it will be the one coming in. That's just running logic. And then the file will be from the parameters of file. It's that file that we have in a special format. So for this next part, we need to have it run some logic for this to work for the cloudinary and the file upload. So with the logic, if the file exists, we'll end it. We'll do a begin and rescue condition. So we would begin end to upload this into cloudinary. So the extension of the file would be the file.extension name, and it would be in a temporary file. That's where it's being stored. Again, this is all coming from the cloudinary documentation. So the cloud image is what would be a URL coming back. What we'll do is that it needs to be a capital C cloudinary uploader. We're using the cloudinary tool here. And you only have access to this if you do put your API keys in and all those credentials. And we are doing an upload. And we need to pass in the file as well as the public ID would be the file.original name. That is inside of the format that we created. So original file name. I'll actually do this on multiple lines, so it'll be easier to be read. And then secure would be true.
What is secure?
It's a Boolean value to say if it is secure or not, because it won't allow you to pass it in if it's not secure. So then we would have the user image to be equal to the cloud image with a secure URL coming back. And then if this doesn't work, we'll do a rescue. And this represents the error. So E is error. And then we'll render JSON the error. And that will give us an idea of what it's doing. And we'll give it a status of 422. And then after these two ends, you should still be in the update method. We need to update the rest of the user. So if user.saves else and render JSON user, and also render JSON the error with the full message. So it'll be errors error user dot errors dot full message with also the same status. So let me go ahead and check to see if everything is here, and then I'll Slack this out. So we need the user with the user ID and the logic for the name and email, the file, and then the logic for the file. So the extension, which would be from temp file, the cloudinary upload. So it's cloudinary : uploader dot upload with the file public ID is the file original name. Secure is true. And then we are uploading the image to be equal to the URL coming back, and then our logic there. So it looks like everything is here. So there is an issue out there for some of the machines. Even though you follow the lecture in this video exactly, your computers will still block the cloudinary, and it will give you an error every single time this works. So we'll test this out, and if you are having that error, there is a certain solution for that error. But if it does work, then it should be able to upload your image entirely. So let's go ahead and do that then. Let's test this out. So anytime that you are adding anything in the configuration or your .env, you need to restart your server. But luckily for us, we didn't have our servers running. So let's have our servers running, and then we'll test out the features of uploading. So I am going to change the name to see if the upload or the update actually works. Then again, using the Yoda. And let's go ahead and run an update. And you have to refresh in order for it to sync in order for it to take the update, because it's still doing the initial state inside of the profile. So you would need to update it for it to grab the mounted value of the image. And that is how you would do an image upload for profile images. And oftentimes you would need to change the styles, because it would actually either be the styles of the full image. So you have to change the styles to what you're working with.
Hey, Henry, mine's not working.
If it's
I'm
not
getting
working,
a proxy error.
if it's a proxy error, let's see if both of your servers are running.
Yep, they're both running.
And then is there any errors inside of your front end? I mean, your Rails?
No. No, it says could not proxy request from localhost 3000 to localhost 3001.
Not the same thing, but it worked.
Is it the
I
same proxy?
am not getting the same thing, and mine is not working.
Yeah, that's the exact error. That's the only error I have. Other than that, if that's not the error, then yeah, I don't know why mine's not working.
This error is because you ran your Yarn server first.
Oh,
So that shouldn't be the issue. So go ahead and try it again and to see if you have the same error. If you do have an error, it should error out. It should console out the error inside of your console, and it doesn't have to do with the warnings or anything like that.
okay. Let me look in my console. Oh, no, it just worked.
Awesome.
Oh, it's because I accidentally uploaded a GIF, but it still worked.
Oh yeah, I think for some files it will still work, like images and PDFs and GIFs, but for like other documents it may not work. So
Right.
I would strictly do images. Any other errors out there?
Mine's not working, but I'm not getting any errors. I'm getting like warnings and
So
some variables unused, but I'm not, yeah, I don't know why.
I would double check if your keys are okay, if your keys are up to date, and also if you have this file correct, the cloudinary.yaml.
One of the I don't think my env file is reading correctly because it shows is like I don't think it's reading it as an env file. Is that possible?
The only way you can read it is that if you're doing it like this. So you would read the cloud name API key and API secret with .env and then the key to those. So it'll be with these names here. So it couldn't be that. It would have to be the strings that you set them to.
I mean, they should be set correctly.
The other thing is maybe the controller is incorrect. So go ahead and grab the one inside of Slack and see if that helps.
Okay.
And then the last thing might be either the provider or the profile might be incorrect. So I'll Slack those out as well. And if all those are the exact same, if you copy and paste those from Slack and it still doesn't work, or if you're getting like a double render error, that means that you actually have a different error.
Let's see. What was this last one that you just sent me?
It is your provider.
The auth provider.
Yep. And then the profile is the one on top. And the one above that is the user controller.
Okay. Give me just a minute. I'm just going to paste this and then restart servers. So,
yeah. Any other errors out there? If you do see a double render error, let Harlan or I know, because there is a specific thing that you would need to do for your computer to allow that to happen. If you're getting a double render error, it just means that your computer is blocking a request made from your controller where you can't pass in images. So it's not you, it's mostly the machine. So if you do get that error, there is a specific way to change that. So we'll end the recording here. Any final questions before I wrap up and end the recording? So let's review what we did to get this up and running. The first thing you need is that inside of your migration file, as well as your schema, there should be a place to store an image. If there isn't, then you would need to add that into your migration file and run a migrate. The other thing that you would need to do is that inside of your form, wherever it is you're creating or uploading the items, what you would do is that you would import drop zone, have the file be in your form. So here inside of the state, have an on drop. This just sets the state to the file that you are uploading for it to be stored. And then inside of your form, you would just copy the exact same thing that you have here. And that will give you the ability to choose a file here. So either drop it in or choose the file here. That is a way you would do it here. After you're done with that, what you would do is in your handle submit, be sure that you're passing the information all the way through, as well as all the other information like name, email, and file. And then in the update user in your provider, or whatever it is, you may do like a add user or create user, whatever it is, what you need to do is that you need to grab the data, create it into a specific format for the file for it to be used. And that will be with these two lines here. And then create an Axios call and pass in the username as well as the ID and email, and then the data that we just created. If it's successful, then it will replace the user and upload the user image here. But for ours, you have to refresh because of the default state. And else it will just render you an error. Inside of your backend, what you would do to set this up is you need to fill out your cloud name, API key, and API secret. You can grab that in your cloudinary account. It's inside of your account details. And be sure to put the those values in the strings, and that will be in your .env. And don't share that to anyone or push that up publicly. And we are storing that in our gignor. And we need .env for that to work, to hide all of our configuration and all of our keys and all that. And then the cloudinary gem for the image hosting to work. So then after you got those inputs already put into your application and your config file, you would create another file called cloudinary.yaml. This just loads up your API keys. And making sure that all your API keys are loaded and in the right key value pairs. So if you want to use your keys, it will be the capital EMV and then the name of your key value pair. Then afterwards, we're able to go into our controller. This is how you would run the file logic. So we need to grab the file from the parameters. And with that, we are uploading it to Cloudinary. And it will give us a secure URL coming back. And that is the image for the user. So we're saving that for the image for the user. And the rest of it is going to be your update or it will be your create. So for our case, it will be an update. So if the user.saves, then it will render JSON back the user for us to use in the front end. And that is all there is to it to have your image hosting. So make sure you're following these steps if you do want to achieve the same thing in your project. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording